Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Midweek Program here at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. My name is Blake, and I'm the Education Assistant here at the Arboretum. And today we are at the entrance to the gardens. We have picked a nice little shady spot because we got a lot of people here today for our Midweek Program. Today's program is the Midweek Intern Takeover. So all of our horticulture interns for this summer, they've been working diligently over the past week or so, pulling together a program for you for this Midweek Program today. And before we get started, I would also like to thank all of our donors who have supported our internship program here at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. We have lots of interns this summer. We have 4 horticulture interns, a few education interns. We've got a whole bunch of people on the visitor services team. There's just so many people here that are getting a very valuable hands-on learning experience that could not happen without the support of our donors. So thank you so much, everybody who supports these intern programs. They are valuable not just for us, but for the world, as you'll be able to see the goodness that is created through our interns. Okay, and so with the announcements out of the way, I think we can pass things over to our first intern. Andrew, take it away.
All right. Hey, everybody. My name's Andrew Paul. I'm a horticulture intern at the Arboretum this summer. I'm going to my senior year at State as I'm in plant biology and philosophy. And today I'm going to talk to you about some ferns and might hope you learn something. This was really inspired. This talk was inspired yesterday. We met a master gardener and member of the Arboretum and a volunteer here named Bob Payne, who does a lot of the propagation of ferns. And he also told me this interesting story that before botanists understood how ferns reproduced, it was thought to be some sort of magic. And because unlike other plants, there's no visible seeds or flowers on ferns, and they thought the seeds were invisible. And if you understood how ferns reproduce, you could learn how to turn yourself invisible. And I think that's kind of interesting, and I just find ferns fascinating. But of course, they aren't actually invisible seeds. How ferns reproduce is through spores. So on the backs of lots of ferns, you can find what's called sori. On this, Coniagrame japonica, also known as the bamboo fern, you can see these really distinct lines. Those are the sori, which are the spore-releasing structures on ferns. And so to propagate ferns, in nature, they will release their spores and find a spot on the ground that's moist, and over time develop what's called a prothalis, which is part of the gametophyte. So this entire structure that I'm holding is only the sporophyte, which actually has no sexual reproduction. It only releases the spores. And then in order for the plant to reproduce and gain some genetic diversity, it actually needs the separate part of the plant, which comes from the spores. It's also a little different because you can't just plant the spores like seeds. It needs to be a little more sterile. So Bob made these cups that have a puck of peat moss in the bottom that you hydrate with boiling water to sterilize it. And then over time, it can take from 2 weeks up to 10 weeks for the spores to germinate and create that prothalis structure. And even after that, it takes even longer to actually develop something that you can move from this sort of cup into like a seed pot or something larger. But I just want to show off these fairly young fern gametophytes that Bob brought us yesterday. That's not the only way ferns reproduce. Over here we have Woodwardia orientalis, which if you can pick that up, there's all these tiny leaves coming off of it, which are known as plantlets. And each of these is actually a clone of the plant that they come off of, and you can take these off and put them in a pot, and if you're lucky, you'll get a whole fern just off of that. So you don't have it also releases spores, but you don't have to deal with that if you just find one that's releasing so many plantlets like this. And I think that's really interesting. Another way some ferns reproduce, here I have, check my notes, Adamantium caudatum. So this is, first of all, I really like the structure of this frond. It has some really, these sort of, they kind of look like separate leaves almost, but this is all one frond. This is known as a walking fern. So this is, as this grows, the tip touches the ground on the other side, and a new plant will grow where the tip touches. So you can imagine if you have several generations, it'll just walk across your garden. I think it's a really interesting fern. So in this cup, we actually have spores from an Arithmedium niponica, which this is a different cultivar of that. This is a really nice variegated fern that came from the Lath House. This is known as lemon cream, Arboretum nipponica lemon cream. I really just like the structure, and I like that we have the spores germinating from that. And yesterday, if you were here for the evening garden stroll and the tour that the interns gave, this is one of the plants that I showed off. This is Passia scabarula, comes from New Zealand, and I just really think it's has these really delicate and lacy fronds. And they curl up in the winter. They turn brown as a deciduous plant, but they keep their shape, and I think it still looks nice in the winter, even when they're brown. The other ones I have here these are two of the same genus and species, Pyrosia lingua. Over here I have Hiryu, and this one is Shishi Gashira, sorry. So they're from the same genus and species, but they're very different. I like the sort of variety you get from the Passia to the Arboretum. You get these different shapes, but they're all ferns. And I just really think the diversity is interesting. The Shishi Gashira, Shishi means mane in Chinese, and it's also found the mane refers to this sort of, I'm not sure what to call it, kind of interesting plant tip here that has an interesting shape to it. Also found here on the Coniagrame intermedia Shishi. So Shishi, again, they both have that sort of structure on the end. And most of these are from the Lath House on the Arboretum, but I just picked out some that I found interesting. Additionally, we have some ferns over here that came from our nursery. I believe you could sometimes get them at the plant cart. Yeah, those are just some ferns around the Arboretum that I wanted to show off, and I hope you learn a bit more about spores and how they reproduce.
Okay. Hello, my name is Emma Jones, and I'm going into my second year into the Ag Institute at NC State, which is just a 2-year program. And my major is horticulture with a concentration of ornamental plants and landscape. But today I will be talking about grafting, specifically woody grafts, but I will also mention some herbaceous grafting too. But so you might be asking, what is grafting? And grafting is basically just joining 2 plants together to make 1 plant. And first I want to go over some important vocabulary that you need to know. So in grafting, you will have a rootstock, and this is basically just the bottom part of the plant, and then sometimes you'll have an inner stalk, which will just be in between the bottom part and the top part. And then the last part is a scion, and that is the top part. So why is grafting important? It's important because it can help us, it can increase the productivity of plants, and it can do this by, we could change the variety of a plant in an orchard. So if you have an orchard of fruiting trees, and let's say they're all outdated, and you want to change the variety, you can do that by grafting. And for this, you would use cleft grafting, but I'll get into that later. And you can optimize pollination through grafting, and you can do this by, for example, if you have a fruiting tree and you want, most fruiting trees want to cross-pollinate, but let's say that's not possible, you can actually graft a male scion onto the rootstock of a female, and it can cross-pollinate like that. And then grafting can also be helpful when you want a plant to live in a certain environment. Like if you want a plant to live in the soil here, you can change the rootstock, and it will probably have a better chance of surviving here if it doesn't normally live in this climate. So let's talk about the different parts of the grafting. For the rootstock, it can determine how disease and pest resistant the plants are, how vigorous the plant can be, the longevity of the plant, stuff like that. The inner stalk is basically just a bridge between the rootstock and the scion. So if the rootstock and the scion aren't compatible, then they'll use an interstock between. And compatibility is just based on how closely genetically related they are. So you want the plants to be more closely related genetically for it to work. But then the scion can help determine like how it fruits, the shelf life of it, and how long it lasts on the plant, how disease and pest resistant it is, the foliage of it. It can determine all of that. So how do you graft? You want, one of the most important things for grafting besides compatibility is the cambium layer, which is just underneath the epidermis of the plant or bark. So you need to have these lined up because the cambium divides, like the cambium cells divide and they grow together to create one plant. And that's how grafting works, is they just grow together through the cambium layer. So I mentioned cleft grafting earlier, and that is used for fruiting trees to change like the variety. It's one of the most commonly used one, and it's really simple. You need the rootstock to be 1 to 4 inches, and then you'll create a cleft in the rootstock. And then you'll have the scions, and you want them to be about 1/4 of an inch and long enough to where there's 3 buds, and you will put them in the cleft, lining up the cambium layer, and then you'll have to secure it with wax. And you need to secure it so that the cambium layer stays intact throughout this whole process. And then I quickly want to talk about another form of grafting used for herbaceous plants called splice grafting. And this is commonly used with tomatoes, and basically what you're going to do is the rootstock and the scion have to be the same diameter, and the graft has to be like it's sideways, like at a slant, and then you have to connect them and then use like tape or a plastic silicone clip to keep them together so the cambium layer grows together. And now I'm gonna show you guys some plants that have been grafted. And these 2 plants right here, they are Japanese maples. And you can see these look very different in size, even though they were grafted at the same time. And this is because sometimes there are problems with grafting, and they can, like the rootstock can produce shoots that are not grafted, and if the scion is not strong enough, the rootstock will overtake it and it won't live. But you can fix this by just cutting off the shoot that's from the rootstock.
Could you rotate the pot? The label is in the way.
Oh, yes.
There you go.
And I have a better example of where you can see the graft on this plant. This is a Lawson cypress, and you can see right here where it's been grafted. And I just thought that would have been cool to show off to where you can actually see it. And same with this magnolia. This magnolia has the same problem as this plant, or as the Acer palmatum, where it's shooting off sprouts from below the graft. But this one will live, unlike this other Acer palmatum, because the scion is strong enough and it's not going to be overtaken. Yes. So this right here is the rootstock, and then right here is where the scion begins. And you can see that these shoots are coming out of the rootstock instead of the scion.
Hi, I'm Sarah Remington. I'm currently a garden intern here at the JCRA. I am going into my senior year as a horticultural science at NC State with a concentration in production and entrepreneurship. Today, I'm actually going to be doing a demo on one of probably my favorite group of plants, the carnivorous plants. And before I actually go into any of the serious technical details, I'm just going to go through the materials that I have with me right now. So, of course, I have my pot. You can really use any pot you want. It just has to be sealed on the inside. So this is a standard ceramic garden pot. What we did was I took a piece of like square plastic and just took some silicone caulk and made like a little seal down on the drainage hole so that it'll hold water. I also have just some rocks here. You typically won't find rocks in a bog garden, but I think rocks in a garden are cool. So I raided a drainage ditch on my way over here for some. In this bag right here, I have peat, which is going to be the ideal media for carnivorous plants. If you know anything about carnivorous plants, one of the first things that you will learn typically is that they have to have a special medium. They cannot be grown in standard potting media because more often than not, it does already have fertilizer and nutrients input into it. And because these plants feed off of insects and they're carnivorous, that's where they get all their nutrients from. So by adding nutrients into the media of these plants, you will actually burn them from too much nutrients. So to get to the actual plants that I have today, I have the stars of the show, of course. These are Saracenia pitcher plants. They're upright pitcher plants. Saracenia X Courtier, I think, and you can actually see that one just dropped out some water from inside of its pitcher. These are probably going to be the stars of the show. The ones that I picked out first and that I kind of based the container around. In addition, I actually wanted to show you guys other plants that you can put in these carnivorous containers as well. So this is a Hymenocallis riparia, or a Mexican spider lily. I don't believe it gets much bigger than this, and it produces these really nice big blooms that are typical of Hymenocallis. Here I have another Saracenia. This is Saracenia X Courtier. Which is a much, much smaller version of the Saracenia. So we're probably going to have that little dude in there somewhere. Next, this one's actually probably one of my favorite carnivorous plants. These are Droseras, or as you might know them, sundews. And you can actually see this guy's putting out a flower stalk currently. So I thought that would be a cool little addition to have in the container plant right now. In addition, I have some Corkscrew Rush, which I believe is Juncus, unknown species. It popped up as a volunteer plant in one of our established bog containers that's up on the rooftop terrace. And then something I also got from that is this little grass. It only grows to about an inch tall, but it's a really good like matting plant. It's Elacaris radicans, and it's growing in, again, our other bog garden, and it's just like a nice little layer plant. In addition, I also have some moss that I found growing in the same drainage ditch. So I'm gonna go ahead and start putting together this little container. So with most container gardens, what you want to do is, and any garden in particular, you want to set up layers of interest. Because I have hardscape going in today, whenever you do have hardscape, you want to put, which is the rocks, by the way, you are going to want to put the hardscape in first and then plant around it, because, of course, plants are going to be a lot more flexible than rocks will. So I'm just going to get a nice good layer of this peat down in here. I'm leaving about just enough on one side. I'm kind of planning out where I want everything to be in my head right now, but I'm just going to put them in here to kind of show you guys the layout that I would like to have. So I'm thinking, right, something about like this, and then I'll have the smaller plants kind of scattered up in here, but this is going to be the main layout. So as you can kind of see, I've got my mic tangled up in the spider lily. I've got the much larger plants back at the back, and then some smaller plants kind of scattered in, and I'm doing a bit of an asymmetrical layout, so the spider lily and one of the Saracenians are kind of going to be shoved into this corner. But the reason that I put those in first, just to get an idea instead of the hardscape, is just because I want to make sure that I have the right soil levels at least. So I'm going to take all of that out, dig down a little bit more on this side so that I can fit the spider lily in, and start fitting in my rocks. So I'm thinking, because I've got a pretty wide variety, I've got like a couple of bigger ones. This one's really nice and flat, so it will probably be going back in the back right here. Got a bit of a hefty one. Let's set that one. Maybe right up. Maybe not use that one. I'm going to probably be going a bit more for the flatter ones, just because I do have a lot of plants going, and the rocks aren't the main showcase of this container. So just kind of shove those in like that. A little bit more peat right there. And I'm just kind of going to be layering that peat in along with the rocks, just to kind of make it so that they're a bit more built into the landscape that I'm creating in this little container. Once I get that spider lily in, I think I'm going to add a few smaller ones. But right now, you could see them if I would move the pitcher plants and stuff out of the way. You can see I kind of have my rocks and stuff all laid out. And now I'm going to be putting in some of the bigger plants, which you kind of want to layer in as well. Now, this guy is a little bit root bound. I don't know if you can tell. So I'm actually going to cut, can I cut this? Yeah. Cut the pot down the side, just to kind of break it out without hurting the roots too much. And look at that beautiful root system. These plants grow so nicely. I love spider lilies. And it's okay when you're breaking open these pots like this to, if you break a few of the bottom roots, it's not going to hurt the plant as long as the majority of the root system is still intact. Now, I'm sure that there are some plants that are just that fussy, but I don't think that this one is. What? Yeah, I can be really mean to this one, is what Tim just said. Which I might actually, because she's fighting back a little bit. All right. So I've got this one free. Now, you want to break up the root ball a little bit when they're this tight, and just kind of get those roots started to start moving out into the rest of the container. So I'm not going to work on it too much more, but as you can see, I once again have my mic tattered in it. I've just kind of loosened up the root ball, which will help this spider lily get established. And so I'm just going to put her down in this side, dig it down a little bit deeper. And because this spider lily grows with its leaves kind of going out to the, like on opposites, opposite sides, it's going to be relatively 2D. So I'm actually making sure that I place it to where one of the flat sides is, will like allow for the rest of the plants in the container to be shown off, and it won't start to cover them up. So I'm gonna kind of fill in on this side. And there we go. First Saracenia is going in. And as you can see, really good root system on this one. I believe that these ones are actually native.
All the Saracenias are native to Southeast United.
All of the Saracenias are native.
Terrarium, which goes across the whole Canada, Eastern United States.
So all of the Saracenias are actually native to the southeastern United States. So we've got a couple of good native plants in here. So I'm gonna kind of push this one down in. And if you were to feel the substrate that I just pulled that Saracenia from, you'd definitely be able to feel that it is not normal potting media. It's very, like, I don't want to say slimy, but slimy. Very boggy. And then I'm gonna move this rock over here. Plop this Saracenia down. Just kind of shove it in between those two rocks. There's a little one back here. And just make sure that she's up in there. Next, we're gonna get the Saracini X Courtier, which is this lovely little thing. And of course, you are probably going to have to move the hardscape around as you get the plants in here, just because, you know, the roots might be a little bit pot bound, so they won't be willing to move as much. So I had to shift a couple of rocks back in the back, but otherwise it should be good. Adding the Droseras next. And in this pot, I've actually got quite a few. I think I have 3 or 4 in here. So I'm gonna kind of spread them all out in through the container. So I'm gonna put the one with the flower up in here. And the container garden that I'm making today can easily, maybe minus the spider lily, be moved inside as well. I believe that these can be left outside, but you can make these types of terrariums containers inside as well. And they will make for a lovely, lovely addition to your home. And for those of you who do have carnivorous houseplants inside, one thing that I have learned, someone online made me aware of this. If you don't want to go through the process of getting like flies and stuff for your plants, get betta fish food. Apparently, if you get betta fish food that is 100% black soldier fly larva, the brand that I use specifically is a brand called Fluval. And you mush it up in the distilled water or whatever water you use to water it and make it a little paste. The plants love it. I have done it with all of my carnivorous plants, and every single one of them has given me a bloom in the past month. They love that stuff. And then after that, I'm just gonna kind of pack these like filler plants in. Just wherever there's room. Kind of finish up here real quick. Get the corkscrew rushes back in here. And I don't have my watering can up here because I really did not want to move this probably 80 pounds once it's watered in a container up to the rooftop terrace. But when I do, I'm actually probably gonna go and get some pond water instead of like hose water in order to water my carnivorous plants. Because again, minerals in that, nutrients in that will actually kind of fry the plants. And just kind of top it off with some moss here and there. And now that I've made a real good mess on the table, I think that is all that I have for this. So I'm gonna pass it over to Evan. Thank you guys so much.
You know, that was a lovely rock garden. I am super impressed how that came together. You know, they usually save the best for last, but I'm here to show you today that there are exceptions to every rule. I'm Evan. I am third year, going into my third year at NC State in horticulture and plant breeding. And I am super looking forward to my last 2 years. Everything I've learned has been super, super great. And the people here at the Arboretum have made this truly an excellent internship. And today I'm here to talk with you about roots. Roots are very important to the plant. It's like running to me, meditation for Blake, and sarcasm for Tim. If we didn't have these things, we'd probably just die. And so we're gonna start off here with something you might see in your daily life as a plant person is a pretty normal looking root. These are fibrous roots, and this is a mulberry plant here, which while weeding, I noticed had a lovely yellow root, interestingly enough, meaning there's probably some carotenoids locked into the root here. And again, roots are very important. They store the energy for the plant. They allow uptake of minerals and waters, and they keep out harmful toxins that could be coming up through the plant. So on from there, we have some lovely asparagus here. And so asparagus has, similar to the fibrous roots, a thicker fleshy root, along with some fine roots here. And these fleshy roots will last year to year, as opposed to these fibrous roots here that will die back each year. These, the fibrous roots, are for uptake of water and nutrients, while these fleshy roots are almost wholly for storing starches year to year, and that's gonna produce these lovely funky shoots here. You might notice here a strange structure, and that is actually a rhizome for the asparagus. This is the crown of the asparagus, and it is a rhizome, which is a modified stem, but it serves a similar function to a root. And that's gonna segue us into rhizomes, modified stems. Here's a plant you see very often, the bearded iris, very lovely. This here is a rhizome, and it likes to be kind of a surface crawler for the iris, while it shoots out only a few fleshy roots into the ground. And surprisingly, that is enough for it to keep it stable and hydrated and everything. Iris is truly a beautiful plant. Here, a much funkier rhizome. This is the Oxalis, and you might see that these are orange and scaly, but they spread just like the other rhizome, and just like the other rhizome, it is a modified stem. So we're getting into some interesting stuff here. Maybe you, like me, have lived most of your life thinking roots are roots and not stems or leaves, but there are stems and leaves and roots. And here we move on to the lily with its scaly bulbs. And each of these is actually a modified leaf, go figure. So these can break off, and that's often how the lily spread. And it also stores all the energy necessary to shoot up a new plant in the springtime. So that was a scaly bulb. Here we have a tunicate bulb. These are rain lilies. And these little things here are the modified leaves that store enough energy so that when it rains, it can very quickly shoot up this stalk and this beautiful, cute flower here. And correct me if I'm wrong, but this process, when it gets enough water, happens within 24 hours?
Not that long, yeah.
Not even.
So yeah.
Yeah, so amazing response time here from the bulb that stores enough energy, and once it gets wet enough, is very quick to respond. And then here, our last bulb is a corm. And corms can break off, similar to the scaly bulbs, into cormioles, which are little corms that will shoot little plants up the following year. This is Crocosmia, thank you. This is a beautiful flowering monocot. This particular Crocosmia won...
Not that one, did.
Not this one, never mind. But this is still very beautiful. And here you see these runners. These are stolons. And they will run along the ground and they will shoot up a new leaf and produce a new corm where they end up. Very similar to Andrew's walking fern. These can walk all the way across the garden. And finally, we have some Sempervivum. Yes? Also showing stolons. I don't know how well you can see that, but each of these, pop it off? All right.
Take it out of the pot.
Oh,
If you want.
whoops.
Either way.
Sorry. This is also coming from a runner. It's shooting up this whole new plant here, and that will root as soon as it touches some wet soil, or wet media, moist media, as we call it here at the Arboretum. Finally, I wanted to end this with a picture of a root cross-section of an iris and just show you how much beauty is really in roots. There's so much that we don't pay attention to, but there's still so much value here. And a lot of chemistry happens in the roots, so it's super critical to the plant. I want to end by saying, and Blake is about to wrap this up very nicely, but I want to say thank you for this internship. Thank you to my fellow interns. Everyone here is great. Everyone did an especially great job today. This has been a wonderful experience, and we've gotten to do so much here at the Arboretum, so thank you.
Wow, Evan, there's no way I could wrap it up more nicely than that. But we are not done with this program. We've got questions for interns that have come through. So interns, if you would please come join your friends, your colleagues, your cohort here amongst, and we will start asking you some questions. Okay, so first one we got, this will be for Andrew, might as well. So somebody says, so many of the ferns that you featured are not native. Is there any indication of their sporing out in the wild and becoming invasive, like the autumn fern has done? Do you just want to speak about the invasive potential of ferns generally? Is it a concern, or?
There are some ferns that are more likely to spread. I don't believe most of the ones we have here, they're depending on the environment. I showed the Passia scabrilla, which is not exactly invasive, but it spreads like a weed in where it's native to in New Zealand. I don't know too much about invasive ferns, but I know all the ones we have are a little bit weedy sometimes, but I don't think invasive.
Okay, fair enough. Awesome. Okay, let's get a question for Emma. So, Emma, you mentioned that it might be possible to expand the range of certain plants through grafting. Can you give us an example of one?
Expand the range?
Yeah, like if there's something that we can't necessarily grow here, we may be able to graft it onto something else that may allow us to grow it here. Is there an example of something like that you can think of?
Yeah, literally one of my plants.
For sure.
What is this? So, Raulston cypress is actually an example of a plant like that because it can live here, but not very well. And putting it onto a different rootstock gives it a better life here.
So what rootstock are you putting it on?
I'm not sure.
This is a good point.
It might be, it's on a different Chemiciferous species probably, because it's Chemiciferous Lawsonia. I would guess it might be an obtusa.
That's something that's not usually listed, but it's good information. We should be asking people when we buy plants is what's
Yeah.
what's the...
So Sophia's just saying now that that's good information that should be listed, but it's not necessarily something that we ask the question about what the rootstock might be.
Yeah.
What I was kind of probing for, kind of leaning, one example I can think of is Asian persimmons. You can grow Asian persimmons a lot easier here if you graft them onto our native persimmons. Yes. So it's something as simple as that,
or
grafting.
ABs.
Or ABs, says Sophia.
Yeah, we can grow ABs firm out here, but we can't grow a whole lot of other ABs.
Sure.
But if you graft the other ABs onto ABs firm rootstock.
So Tim's saying we can grow ABs firma here, but not a whole lot of other ABs. So you can graft other ABs onto ABs firma rootstock. So that's basically the concept behind it, is grafting foreign stuff onto native stuff so that you can have the foreign stuff and it'll be nice and productive here.
Also, they do it for hardiness on certain things.
Yes.
The citrus, they can get a hardier citrus if they graft it onto citrus structurally.
Yeah. And so Tim is sharing information with us, but guess what? This is not Midweek with Tim. This is the intern takeover. So Tim, stay where you are. You are not welcome on this program today, unfortunately. We are grateful that you're here in the garden with us, but today is the intern's day. So, okay. Thank you so much, Emma. So let's see. For Sarah, they were asking about, are you putting rocks in the bottom of the pot?
I am not putting rocks in the bottom of the pot. If you were to, which you definitely probably shouldn't for carnivorous plants because they like to be sitting in water, and rocks aren't really going to do much for that. I am simply just putting big rocks like this in there as kind of decoration, which they're a little dirty right now, but you can kind of see how they kind of pop up and just add that nice little bit of silvery gray into the container garden and just kind of add that new layer of depth.
Awesome. And we'll keep asking because they had a lot of questions about your bog garden.
Okay.
Somebody asked, can plastic pots be used to make bog gardens?
Yes. In fact, the less porous the pot is, the better it is going to act as a bog garden. So for my carnivorous plants at home, I actually like the aesthetic of glass. So I get glass fish bowls, and I actually have a glass pitcher of pitcher plants, of course. And what you can do is you can just use that as like a little terrarium. If your home is really dry, a fish bowl kind of will also help to keep in the humidity and the water so that they don't dry out super fast. But I just have this glazed ceramic pot, sealed it on the bottom, and that will do just fine for these plants.
Awesome. Somebody asked, do your tools need to be sterilized before you kind of hack into the roots like you did, that kind of thing?
Typically, so if you have a very sensitive plant, then yes, you should probably sterilize your tools. With the lilies, these are extremely hardy, so I'm not super worried about it, and I haven't been cutting any sort of diseased plants or anything like that, and I do sanitize them pretty regularly. I just haven't today. It's not a very big deal, unless, again, you have a very sensitive plant, but I could rip this lily in half and it would not care.
For sure. Okay, and one more question for you. A recommended pot depth for a bog planter such as this?
So I actually learned this from Tim earlier today. If you are using a more porous pot like this, so like the underside and the inside of this pot are not glazed, so it's going to be a lot more porous. You do want a bit of a deeper pot. This pot goes all the way down to right here for the base, I believe, so that's like a good 5-6 inches. If you were to use glass or plastic, again, just make sure it doesn't have drainage holes in it. I have a little sundew, probably about the size of this bigger one, which is about that big around. I have it in a little fish bowl about this big with that much media in it, and it loves it.
Awesome. And are you going to be putting that planter out in the garden somewhere here?
Mm-hmm.
Where?
So unless we would like to move it elsewhere.
Let's do a
Lath house? I have just been told that we might be putting it in the lath house.
Awesome. So everybody come to the lath house soon and see this wonderful planter that Sarah has pulled together. Okay, now Evan, nobody asked you a question, and I can't even. I don't know. Normally, it must have been because you were so informative that nobody came up with anything. But I will ask you a question. What is I don't know, a plant that has the best ornamental roots that you can think of? Roots as an ornamental plant feature. I know it's hard, a weird concept, but it is not completely unanswerable. Do you?
Oh. Emma has offered exposed roots orchids as an answer. I do love iris. You can see that iris rhizomes above the ground.
Avocados. You can do avocado bonsai on top of you can do avocado bonsai on top of a rock and let the roots drape down.
That's cool. I love that
You
feature.
guys know he's a bonsai expert.
Not
Oh,
expert.
yeah, when you see the roots drape over something,
the
that's great.
Just a,
Yeah.
just a casual.
Yeah.
Just I've been doing it for over a decade, so I'm just a beginner. So, yeah.
Only a few more generations to go.
Exactly. Well said, Evan. You are 100% correct about that. Okay, so there are no more questions here. So I just got to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart for pulling this together. You guys did an amazing job. I know I was kind of making it out that you guys are going to be awesome, but you did not disappoint anybody. You went above and beyond. It was beautiful. It was perfect. It was everything it needed to be. So thank you so much. And thank you everybody for tuning in today. We really appreciate having you here with us. We will be back next week at 3:00 on Wednesday, and we will be going over the color trials at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. So make sure you come back and join us for that. We'll see you all then. Y'all take care.